Hello guys, this is Ark and this is the patch 13.12 nodes. Um, I think this is some sort of like cleanup from the mid-season patch. Certain overtuned champions are being nerfed, some of the items are nerfed as well. So let's just get right on top of that. So Ash is getting a buff. Her passive damage goes from 115% to 120% of the critical strike chance. Um, this is good regardless of if you're an AD carry Ash or a support Ash. Basically, when the enemy is slowed by Ash, they take more damage after in the following auto attacks. So this happens regardless of if you have, an AD build or an AP build. So now here auto attacks deal more damage. Here W is also getting 10 base damage extra, which again is good regardless of AD or supportive Ash. And here ultimate is getting 20% of AP ratio, which is generally only good for the mandate builds. I think Ash was not necessarily bad. I think the item rework is kind of good for her, at least the maximum builds, but I think she's lagging behind, the stronger AD carries at this moment. So I think these changes are good for both AD and supportive Ashe. Gangplank Powder Keg E cooled down from 18 seconds to 18 to 14, so they basically reverted um, the change they did like a couple months ago. I think Gangplank was in a terrible state after the item rework because he had to build Navori quick blades, but he also needs something like basically it's the Prowler's Claw. Not being able to have access to the extra dash for the Orlean is not good enough, and now he has to choose between Duskblade and Navori. Um, if he could get both of them, that would be nice, but he cannot. So he has to go Navori, and then he has to go Essence River. Then he doesn't have access to like Infinity Edge or the Storm Razor or Static Shift builds are not good on Gangplank. So I'm not sure if this is enough to make him viable again, but I think it's a good thing because at least now he does not necessarily need to build into a lot of ability haste. Uh, I'm not sure if, again, if this will make him viable again, but I think it's a good change. Gragas, I'm sure this is a nerf. Passive Happy Hour cooldown 8 seconds to 12 seconds, and Q Barrel Roll mana cost 80 to 80 to 60. So now obviously you get more value out of maxing Q as Gragas, so like the AP builds are generally better now. Um, in cases where you're going max E, this is not really going to affect you. But the big thing, obviously, is the passive. The cooldown going from 8 to 12 seconds is a big thing. Gragas has been overtuned for a very very long time now, and getting this nerf is 100% it was needed. Um, is this a big thing? Yes, this is a big thing for laning phase, especially um, because a lot of players will be like optimizing this cooldown to be able to get it, off cooldown basically. So now being basically doing two passive procs in the time you were doing three can be a big thing and a big shift to Gragas's laning phase. Will this move Gragas out of top lane or even mid lane or jungle? Definitely not. But now it will be more punishable and it will not be as good of a blind pick as it once was. Kisante, E footwork, cooldown 9 to 7 seconds to 10 to 8.5. Um, Another champion that is overtuned, especially in pro play. So getting 1.5 second extra on the E cooldown is definitely a significant nerf, especially in the at rank one, and going from 9 seconds to 10.5 can be a big thing. Um, Later in the game, I'm not sure if this necessarily means a lot, as Kisante gets a lot of ability haste, but in the early game, it can hurt his trading patterns. It he might not be able to like dash away in a situation that he was able to dash away before. So I think this is a good nerf. Eh, will this move Kisante out of the meta? Definitely not. Same as Gragas here, but it's a good thing to like give him a small nerf, like small to medium sized nerf, and see how it goes from that point. Kaisa base stats attack damage growth 2 to 2.6, so she gets an extra 0.6 AD per level. This is roughly 10.5 or 10.8. 10.8, almost 11 AD at level 18. Um, will this be enough to make Kaisa better than she was before? I mean, she will obviously be better, but it's not necessarily enough. The thing is, um, it might help her with her evolve on her Q. Um, like for example, if you're able to get your Q evolve like a couple minutes earlier, because for example, you had to get level, let's say 12 to get your evolved Q. Now you can do this at level 10. This can be massive. So this might not seem big, but if you get the evolved Q like 1 minute or 2 minutes earlier than before, it can be a big thing for Kaisa. So I think this can be significant, or at least more significant than it seems at first. Kha'Zix's base AD 63 to 60. Um, this is, the basic change to like we do not know exactly what to do, so we're just nerfing his base AD. I think Kha'Zix has been overtuned, especially with the new items. I think he benefited a lot by the new Dusk Blades or the new Yomus, and um, bringing him down a peg is definitely warranted, especially considering he received buffs, some patches ago to his ultimate. So I think this is a good change for Kha'Zix. Obviously, this means that he gets at least a 0.5% less win rate now, maybe even more. Yeah, I'd say he will go down. His win rate will go down by zero point 0.5 to 1%, which means it's a significant nerf. Kog'Maw, I'm assuming this is a nerf. W bonus magic damage, so it goes from 3.5 to 6.5% of the opponent's maximum health to 3 to 6%. So uh, basically, it loses 0.5% of enemy's maximum health per auto attack. Um, this doesn't mean that Kog'Maw will be bad now. It will still be a strong pick with for solo queue, especially with like Milio and Yumi and all that. Um, it might just be slightly less oppressive than what it was before, because before Kog'Maw could just go, um, even tanky items after some point and still be able to shred you. He will still be able to shred you, but maybe some cases where he was killing you before, he will not be able to kill you now. And if this means that there is a 0.3% drop in his win rate, not not the biggest, not what I would like to see. I would like to see a slightly bigger nerf to Kog'Maw, but it's a good step to the right direction. Um, Lucian, vigilance damage, that's the passive, right? 14 plus 20% AD to 10 to 15% AD, so they nerf the passive damage. I think this is not the double proc. I think this is the when you get a shield, your two next auto attacks get buffed. So I think those two next auto attacks are nerfed now. But it says that when Lucian, okay, so before when Lucian was empowered by an ally, so for example a heal or a shield, his next two basic attacks would be dealing bonus damage, which was this. Now, when Lucian is healed or shielded by an ally, or when a nearby enemy champion is immobilized, his next two basic attacks deal 1 damage. So the conditions to get those two auto attacks is, now, for example, a Leona or a Morgana can like CC somebody, and Lucian will get these two procs. So basically, what this means is that Lucian is now nerfed kind of when he's paired with things like Nami and Lulu, Sona, etc. But is being buffed, or not necessarily buffed, but he can now work and synergize with other supports like Engage support as well, which before he was not really able to synergize with. So basically what this means is that this change opens up Lucian for more pairings at the bottom lane and not just you know having to play with Nami or like Sona, Milio, etc. I'm wondering if you're able to play Lucian mid or Lucian top now with a CC jungler like Sejuani, because Sejuani Q will like knock up the enemy, so you get two procs here, and if you stun the enemy, you also get another two procs. So maybe this means that we can see the return of maybe a laning Lucian, even though I do not think that this will happen. What this means for Lucian's win rate, I think Lucian's win rate will go down by just a bit now, because people are only willing to play Lucian in like Nami and Sona in melee lanes, um, which means that in those cases, this nerf here will mean that his win rate will go down. Um, and until people realize that they can play Lucian now with like a Thresh, Leona, etc., I think his win rate will tank a little bit, maybe by like a 0.6 to 0.7%, um, until, again, people figure out that he can pair with like a good engage supports now, and maybe at that point, Lucian's win rate will go back up a little bit. Lulu, armor 29 to 26, so that's a big nerf already, because Lulu is already quite vulnerable in lane, and having 3 less armor means that she's under more threat now. Passive, magic damage 15 to 117 to 9 to 111, so she also loses 6 magic damage on her passive, which is also big. Um, and her seal value on her E goes from 75 to 215 to 75 to 235. So what this means is that Lulu's seal is now bigger, and this is the skill you max first. So you will be getting this buffed value early on, um, but she's more vulnerable now, and the passive damage is less now as well. So she's not as oppressive in lane anymore. Um, Basically they move her to be even more supportive now and be even less aggressive, which I think Lulu was kind of overtuned in lane anyway, and I think this is a good change for Lulu. Milio armor 28 to 26, armor growth 4.9 to 4.6. So basically, let's say at level 18, Milio will be losing a total of like 7.5 armor, which can be quite big. I mean, of course, Milio doesn't ever get level 18, but at level 10, for example, he loses 5 armor, which can be quite important. It can be quite impactful in a lot of cases. Passive empowered attack damage 15 to 35 AD based on allies level to 15% AD. So this is a big nerf, especially for things like Jhin and Caitlyn. Generally, champions that build a lot of AD. Now he loses a lot of damage from his passive. His early game is not that hurt by this, apart from maybe the -2 armor, but his mid to late game transition can be quite affected. I think Milio had been quite overtuned for quite some time now, especially when it synergizes so well with a lot of champions in general, not just AD carries. So I think this is a good change for Milio. Nasus passive lifesteal 9 to 19% to 11 to 21. So Nasus basically permanently gets an extra 2% lifesteal, um, which honestly I do not think it really matters that much, especially in the laning phase. I do not think it really matters at all. Maybe later in the game, if he has a lot of stacks, it means that this is even more impactful than um, than what it is at rank 1, for example, but I don't think this really make that much of a difference. Our Fury of the Sands cooldown 120 seconds to 120 to 80 seconds, which is a big buff to Nasus because having this for the entire game means that, especially in like later game team fights, you have to be a bit more selective with your R usage. And if you were to be disengaged and lose your ult, then you're kind of like useless for until you get it back. And now going to 80 seconds at max rank means that with enough ability haste, this can go down to like let's say 45 to 50 seconds. And considering that the ult lasts for like 15 seconds, um, the cooldown basically becomes like 30 seconds, which is quite big. Oriana, our damage increased. So it goes from 250 to 450 to 250 to 550, and an extra 5% of AP ratio. So this is a big buff to Oriana, at least for her ultimate. It does not change her laning phase at all, or like her, like it doesn't really change her in the first 15 minutes of the game, but after that, in the mid to late game transitions, this can be quite big, because now having an extra 50 damage base on her rank 2 ultimate and 100 extra on her rank 3 alongside 5% AP means that, for example, in a late game scenario, Oriana has 500 AP. This means that her ultimate deals roughly like 125 extra damage, uh, which it can be huge. It can be huge. If you combine it with another form of engage and her W, it means that she can even like one shot entire teams if he gets a good shockwave in. Um, will this be enough to make Oriana viable again? I think Oriana is fine at the moment. Like she's a balanced pick. But the problem is there are like stronger picks right now in the mid lane, which is why she gets kind of forgotten. Like Annie is like Annie is slightly a better Oriana at this point with her shields and her passive T-burst, etc., which is more instant. Um, I think or in order for Oriana to get back into the meta, I do not think she needs to be buffed necessarily, but I think that the current mid lane champion pool needs to be nerfed, like Annie, Syndra, and whatever else is going into the mid lane, like some tanks, etc. So Rel, um, let's see. So default adaptive force stat is going from AD to AP, which makes sense. Q Shattering Strike cast time 0.5 to 0.4 seconds. That is big. Um, Magic damage goes down by 10 base in every rank. Jungle monster damage 300% of base damage to 150 to 430 bonus damage to monsters. This means basically that if she does not build AP, this doesn't really change much. But there was like some AP builds for L, where she was doing like way too much damage to jungle camp. So I think this is a good change. And I think this is a case for all of these uh, changes that I'm highlighting here. W Ferromancy Crashdown. Magic damage is also being reduced by 10 base, so she loses 10 from Q and 10 from W, so minus 20 so far. Um, E Full Tilt, 35 to 95 to 25 to 65, and so she loses. Wait, no, that's the E, right? Not the ultimate. Okay. So she loses like 10 damage plus 5 per rank. Um, Also the same here for jungle camps. Okay. So what happens here is that a full combo from Rel, which is what she usually does when she engages anyway, is at level 1 or at level 3. she loses 30 damage plus 1% of maximum health, um, which can be quite impactful. And later on the game, she loses even more from her E, um, like an extra 30. So I think Rel was quite strong at the moment, like a good solid engage support, being quite tanky, good CC, and good damage. And I think this nerf is it's not gonna move her away, but I think it's warranted as well. Rumble, wow, a lot of changes. I think this is a mini rework for Rumble. Base stats, base health minus 35, health growth 99 to 105. So he will eventually get his health back from leveling up, which is fine because the problem with Rumble is that his levels 1 to like 3 or 4 were extremely strong with his Q, and was not really punishable. So now this means that he has slightly less HP to work with early on, but he will get that back as the time goes on. So I think this is fine. Passive maximum hit 100 to 150. So he now overhits at 50 extra hit, which is a big change. It's why I call this a rework, um, because it completely changes your spell rotation and your trading patterns. Danger zone remains at 50 plus. Overhit monster damage cap 80 to 65 to 150. Okay, good generally for jungle rumble. Overhit attack speed 20 to 80% to 50 to 130%. This is massive. Overhit duration 5.25 to 4 seconds. So even just those changes alone are enough to make him in some sort of like rework, because now you go much less often into overhit, which means that you get to use your overcharged abilities, not like danger zone abilities, more often, which means more damage overall. Uh, but the downside is that you go into overheat and thus your auto attacks deal less damage overall. The thing is that with this change, you can use your empowered abilities more often now and like peel off afterwards. And if you want to go all in and get to overheating, this means that you can now use a lot more auto attacks within that small duration. Also, the fact that the overheat duration now is down by 1.25 seconds means that you get to use your abilities again much more quickly. Uh, so maybe like a last second shield to save you, etc. And another thing that this does is that it gives value to ability haste for Rumble, because previously if you got like more than 50 ability haste, it meant that you were overheating anyway, so it didn't matter. So the fact that now you have more hit, so you can play with more abilities, means that ability haste can be very, very useful now. And the fact that the overheat duration is also down means that you get access to your abilities faster, which means having more ability haste means that you get to use this overheat duration decrease even more. So this is a big change, and I'm expecting a lot of changes like itemization and playstyle. Q Flame Spitter. Magic damage is goes from okay. These are big changes as well. 180 to 340 plus 110% AP. So the AP ratio stays the same, but now instead of the base damage being this, it goes to 135 to 195. But you also get percent target maximum health 6 to 10%. Um, so for example, at level 1, rank 1, you're losing 45 base damage, but if you're hitting a target with 700 HP or more, it's basically the same. And at max rank at level 9, you're losing 145 base damage. But if you're hitting a target with 1450 HP or more, you're doing the same damage. So I think this is a buff overall for Rumble. And of course, and now it means that Rumble can be good against tanks. So I think this is overall a very nice change for Rumble. Um, Minion damage modifier is 60 to 80% to 55 to 75. This is fine. Monster cap percent health damage 65 to 300 based on level. So I think this is fine. Just fine tuning his jungle clears. W scrap seal 60 to 180 plus 45% AP to 25 to 145 plus 4% of max health plus 25 AP. So there will be some more calculations here. So at rank 1, you're losing 35 um, base shield and 20% AP, which is roughly, let's just say, like 20, no, roughly 40, 40 less shield. But since you have like 600 base health, this means that you get 24 more. So this is a minus 15 shield at level 1, roughly. Um, I think this kind of starts to balance out base damage, yeah, base damage wise or base shield wise. At I think at 1000 HP, or like slightly less than 1000 HP, you get the same base shield, and then you always have the minus 20% AP, which means that as long as you keep building a lot more HP from like Night Harvester and uh, I don't know what else, like maybe Horizon Focus, like items that grant you health, this shield might be even better than before in some cases. Electro Harpoon hit generated 10 to 20, so this is kind of a big change. Like people need to get used to the new trading patterns again. Um, it doesn't change the fact that you still have more chances to use your abilities anyway before overheating, so this is fine. The equalizer cooldown 100 to 70 to 130 to 80. So I think all these are big buffs to Rumble, so you had to take something away from him, and that is from his ultimate. I think his ultimate being 100 seconds of cooldown at rank 1 was quite unhealthy because even if Rumble falls behind, he could just, ult the wave from far away and get a recall in, come back to lane and be fine. Now having 30 extra seconds on his ultimate means that he cannot do this as freely as before. Of course, in the late game, like mid to late game, this is going back to relatively good standards again. So it's not that big of a problem. So I think an overall great rework for Rumble. I really want to see how this affects his play style and how even especially Rumble mains react to the change. Rise, passive arcane mastery maximum mana increase 6% per 100 AP to 10% per 100 AP. So now you build more AP on Rise and you get more mana as a result. And considering that his spells scale off of maximum mana as well, this means that he gets an overall buff to all of his spells. His spell flux magic damage is the base damage is the same, but he gets a 5% extra on AP ratio, which combined with the extra mana from this means he gets even more damage on this. And missile speed 3500 to 4000. So now I think the EQ is much more smooth now, which is fine. So I think Rise is getting us a kind not a huge buff to make him broken, but I think it's a good buff indirectly, kind of to make him viable again. Um, would this be enough to make him come back to pro play? Maybe yes. Maybe this is enough to have people give him a try. Like this is kind of like a placebo buff, but at the same time maybe not. Like it seems like a placebo buff for people to try Rise again, but I think it will be enough to make him like strong again though. So we will wait and see, I guess. Severe buffs, I think. Attack damage growth decreased from 2.8 to 2.5, so she loses 0.3 AD per level. At level 18, she loses 5.4 AD, but W Rico bounce damage 25 to 45 AD to 30 to 50% AD. So they want to buff Sivir, uh, but I'm not sure if this is the way to go. Um, because the thing about Rico set at the moment is, if we're talking about pushing minion waves, this 5% extra AD ratio doesn't matter because Sivir's wave clear becomes good once he starts getting items. It doesn't matter if you level up your W a lot or not. She will clear the waves with 1 W and 1 Q anyway, so this doesn't really matter. So you have to wonder if this is good for her team fights when she's like having to hit enemy champions. And I still think it doesn't really matter anyway because the damage from this is so low, even with the extra 5, it doesn't matter. Basically, what happens is that she starts with kind of like an extra rank on her W. So she starts with a rank 2 at rank 1, rank 3 and rank 2, etc. So is that enough to make Sivir stronger? No way. Um, and considering that the item changes do not suit Sivir at all, like Storm Razor is bad on her, Static Save is not required because she already has insane wave clear. Um, eh, Basically, the fact that every other AD carry at the moment gets access to a lot of wave clear with static save means that Sivir is even more nerfed than before. Um, Run's Hurricane is not utilized by Sivir. So what does she even get? Like, what is her itemization now, right? Um, and the fact that they decrease her attack damage growth means that it's like I'm not sure why they even like put that in. Like the AD growth nerf. I'm not sure why it exists there. They could just go with this and see where it goes from there. But this, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about this either. I'm just saying that they want to buff her, but they nerf as well. So it's weird. Yumi, oh god, here we go. W, you and me. Best friend bonus 10 to 10% healer shield power to 5 to 15% based on spell rank. So this is already a huge nerf to Yumi because you could max this ability last and still be able to get a lot of heal and shield power. Now you have to max this ability to be getting the buff. If you max this first, maybe you will not feel the nerf as much, but it's an overall nerf anyway. Um, Zumi's E, 90 to 210 shield value to 80 to 180, so she loses 10 to 15, 20, 25, and 30 shield per rank, which is quite big. Attack speed buff 35% to 25 to 35%. So the ally also loses a lot of attack speed from this. So these are big, big nerfs for Yumi. Final chapter R heal per hit 35 to 65 to 25 to 55. So she gets massive, massive, massive nerfs across the board. Um, I think Yumi was strong for pro play especially, but even like for solo queue, if you were like doing with your AD carry, maybe smurfing, etc., Yumi was a great way to gain some free LP. I'm not sure if you really need to nerf her that much because right now it seems that she's getting very, very extremely gutted. Um, but I guess I'm pretty sure this will drop your win rate by like 2%, which is quite massive. Um, like these are a lot of big nerfs, so I'm not sure if this was needed. Maybe like having just the E, like removing the final chapter nerfs could be fine, but having all of these at the same time is quite big, and I do not necessarily agree with this. Zeri, oh god, here we go again. Movement speed 330 to 335, so 5 more extra movement speed. Passive removed. The passive was very. Oh man, this is so much. Okay, the passive from here Q now becomes your actual passive. Um, Zeri does not steal 45% of the shield she deals damage to. It doesn't gain 10% movement speed every time she does this. She receives a shield. Um, okay, so Q. Okay, again, the passive of Q is moved to her actual passive, and her Q auto attacks do not proc Sin, so no more Triforce, Sunderer, Essence River, Lichbane procs, which is great. And E Spark Suits, maximum on-hit critical strike multiplier, 65% to 85%. So this means that no more Triforce builds, I'm assuming at least, and more critical strike based because of the E buff. I cannot necessarily comment on this. We will have to see how critical strike builds play out now, but I think this is a good change because you were able to go Triforce, Sterex Gauge, maybe Titanic Hydra and still be a monster. So I think having to go into critical strike chance now is a good change for Zeri, I think. Um, Ardent Sensor nerf, Sanctify on hit damage 15 to 30 to 15, so a big nerf for this. Bloodthirster, total cost plus 200 gold, another slight nerf for Bloodthirster, which was quite overtuned. Gale Force, AD 55 to 50, and active damage, 150 to 350 plus 200% critical strike chance to 150 to 350 plus 45% bonus AD. Um, so for users that it says here that if you have 444 bonus AD, that the active damage is more, but below 440 AD, assuming you have a 100% critical strike chance, you have less damage. So overall, a nerf for the item. Uh, I'm not sure if it necessarily needed to be nerfed, but I guess this is a fine change anyway. Silbow was a shit item. Now they go from 7% lifesteal to 10%, which was quite needed. Maybe I think it would be better if the Silbow's shield was bigger. Um, but I guess I do not think this item is any good anymore. Um, there are so many other better items to build if you want survivability, especially to the point that Silbo is now a very, 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 very niche item. Um, Imperial Mandate is getting nerfs to the initial proc and the secondary proc on the damage. 35 to 75 to 1460 and 75 to 150 to 80 to 120. So it gets better at level 1, which doesn't matter because you only build this item after level 7, for example. And it gets nerfed, I think, after like level 6. This is a nerf already. Um, Riot thinks that this item was quite overtuned. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm going to trust him on that one. Um, so I guess the nerfs are were needed in that case. Um, Moonstone Ringer, another strong item at the moment. The extra heal 20 to 40% to 35%, shielding 30% to 40% to 40% overall, and same target heal bonus 15 to 30 to 25, and same target shielding 20 to 30 to 30%. Mythic passive 5 ability haste to 5 heal and shield power. Alright, so these are big changes for the item. First of all, the mythic passive is big because having 5 ability haste on this on basically every item means that you don't get a lot of diversity uh, in what you want to build. So now that you have a different passive means that some champions might be more willing to utilize this. Um, it also means that shielding champions get much more value from Moonstone now as compared to healing ones. So things like Janna, for example, or like Lulu are getting a solid buff from this item, and I'm currently waiting to see how how it feels now. It says here that Moonstone is weak on every champion that isn't named Soraka. I would say this is kind of true. We're changing the formulas to always give the values that allies of level 14 plus were getting in most cases. This typically ends up augmenting the value of heals and shields by roughly 5% per cast and giving shields more leniency due to them feeling less disruptive. Overall, a good change, I think. Phantom Dancer attack speed 30% to 35%. Um, Phantom Dancer was a strong item before the item rework because every other item didn't feel really impactful, so you were getting this item as a third or second item. But now that you have Civ and Stormraiser and like Guinsoo AD carries with freaking Hurricane, etc., a lot of people are overlooking Phantom Dancer. This extra attack speed, will this be enough to make the item relevant? Maybe in some cases, like Sivir, for example, that doesn't really utilize the new items. You can make use of the Phantom Dancer, have the extra attack speed, but apart from that, I don't think it changes the item by much. Maybe if they make this item 100 or 200 gold cheaper, maybe at that point it will be a viable item again. Rapid Fire Cannon energized damage 60 to 140 to 60. Uh, Personally, I didn't think there was any reason to have the damage on the proc from Fire Cannon be scaling based on level. So I think just a base 60 is fine. Static save energized damage 80 to 190 to 180. Levels 7 to 18 and 6 to 18. You never build this item before level 8 or 9, I think, anyway, so this doesn't matter. It's an overall nerf for the item, but not by a big margin, so it doesn't really matter. Static CV will still be an okay item. I flamed the item in the previous patch because it was so shit, and then they buffed it by a significant amount, maybe roughly like 10 to 15% on the damage it deals. So now it's a decent item, especially compared to the nerf of Stormraiser. So I think Static Save was quite decent. I'm trying to. So they're trying to buff up the Static Save's proc damage in the early game, which is what happens, um, and nerf it in the later game. So like I think until level 13, Static Save proc deals more damage, and then it evens out and becomes worse later on. I mean, later in the game, Static Civ will one-shot the minion waves anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Like you get 10 less damage. In the early game, it is slightly better now, so I think this is a good change anyway. Overheal, seal value 20 to 300 to 11% of maximum health. So I think this is a nerf for AD carries who typically have like 2.3k HP. So the maximum value will be 250 or something. But it's better for like HP stackers. I'm not sure which HP stacker, like which champion who goes above like 3000 HP ever takes overheal as a rune anyway. Who knows, you know? Who knows? Systems, mid lane gold. Uh, Minions. Okay, so like some patches back, they did a nerf to mid lane minions. They were giving one less gold. So like caster minions, instead of 14, they will give you 13 gold. Now they reverted this because reasons. Um, I never understood why they nerfed the gold in the first place, but it's good that it's being reverted. Red buff, damage 6. Okay, so I think the damage from red buff um, is lower now. So basically 12 to 114 to 10 to 78. So this is quite a significant nerf. Um, Slow amount 10-15 to 25 to 10-15 to 20 half the range champions, and health regeneration is down as well. So a big nerf for the red buff uh, overall, both like in its damage and slow and health regen. Um, I think generally this is fine because now that you can share the buffs with your jungler after your jungler completes the jungle item, so now the jungler can pick it up plus one more ally. Um, Means that there is more uptime for red buff on your team, which means that I guess it's fine to have to have the red buff be of less value in terms of health regen and damage and slow. So I think this is fine. Some ARAM adjustments, no severe buffs, so I'm not gonna read through any of those. Class, mythic sword rotation, doesn't matter. Okay, so a quick recap. Ash, good buff for both her AD and support position. I like it. GP was a needed buff as well, in a way that he's not completely annoying to play against. Gragas, long overdue nerf, and a significant one at that. I'm expecting at least half a percentage of win rate drop. Kisante, a kind of significant nerf as well, needed. A small buff to Kai'Sa that could be that could end up being a huge one based on her Q evolve timings. Kha'Zix gets -3 AD, which means that it can be quite significant as well. A small nerf to Kog'Maw, I think this is not enough, but it's a nerf anyway. So if we, um, yes, if we combine this nerf to Kog'Maw alongside the nerfs of Yumi and Milio, I think this is bigger than it seems on its own. Lucian now is nerfed when combined with enchanters like Nami, etc., but opens up more synergies with Leona and Braum and Thresh and other engaged support. So I think it's a good change overall, and we will see how Lucian works out. Lulu nerfed to her aggressive playstyle and more and a buff to her supportive one, which is fine, I guess. Milio becomes more squeezy, and the passive damage, especially for allies, is much less now. So I think a good nerf as well. Um, a slight buff for Nasus. I do not think this means that Nasus comes back into the meta or anything, but for solo queue, I think this is a fine slight buff, nothing huge, but I think it's a decent change. Orianna has more damage on her ultimate now, which means that there might be situations where she might be able, in like wombo combo comps, be good enough, or like in a lot of melee comps, like enemy melee comps, she can get good shockwaves in. Again, as I said before, though, if the other mid laners like Annie do not get changed and nerfed, Orianna I do not think can come back into the meta anyway. Small nerf across the board for Rel in her damages, base damages, which is fine. Rumble mini rework, playing around overheating now is different, so you have to basically kind of relearn the champion, and because of that, his itemization can change. Not necessarily change from what it was before, but you can play around ability haste now, which means that you have to basically relearn the champion, kind of becomes a new champion if you think about it. Good changes overall anyway though. Rise gets a small buff, which I think might be enough to make him pop up in some cases at pro play. Sivri gets an overall buff, but personally I don't think it's enough. Yumi gets a big nerf, like a very big nerf, which I think was needed for a long time now. Zeri is also kind of changing from the Triforce builds to more critical strike builds, which is also a good change personally, and again a good change. Um, Most of the items being changed, all, if not all of them, are good. Sensor was broken, nerfed. Bloodthirster and Gale Force were broken, or like not broken but overtuned, so they are nerfed. Silbo was bad, it's buffed. Mandate was I think a bit strong, but is nerfed now. Moonstone is nerfed for Soraka, but buffed of basically everybody else. Phantom Dancer needed a small buff to make it more appealing. Fire Cannon slightly nerfed on the proc damage. Static Shift slightly buffed in the early game, slightly nerfed in the late game. Runes Overheal is changed. I don't think this will change anything at all though. And mid lane gold, giving the same gold as every other lane now again is correct. And the red buff being nerfed kind of is correct as well. So I think overall it's a good patch. Like every change here was quite good, quite needed. The thing is that I would like to see some nerfs like Kindred, some nerfs to Annie, some nerfs to what else is strong at the moment? Like the two champions that come to mind are Kindred and Annie at the moment. Um, for pro play, I'm not sure what else you need to be you need to nerf basically. I think Vi might need some small adjustment, maybe even like her R cooldown being 20 seconds more or 10 seconds more at rank 1 or something. Even that could be quite a decent nerf. But overall, the patch is fine. So this was a patch rundown, and I hope you enjoyed. I will see you on the next one.